They claimed she fought back during the arrest. They said 72-year-old Martha just took a tumble on her way to the police station. But the dashboard camera would ultimately reveal something else entirely, a tale of brutality, hubris, and a crooked cop named Higgins who believed his shield made him untouchable. He had no clue that the delicate woman he was ridiculing, the one bleeding in his patrol car's back seat, wasn't merely a retired nurse. She happened to be the mother of Colonel Isaiah Washington, a shadow operative with Delta Force holding the Pentagon's highest security clearance. Officer Higgins figured he was having an uneventful Tuesday. He couldn't imagine that before his coffee went cold, he'd not only lose his badge but face the full, devastating power of America's elite Special Operations Forces. This is the account of the phone call that rocked an entire city. The morning sunshine over the quiet Georgia town of Oak Haven burned hot, but 72-year-old Martha Washington didn't care. She occupied the exact spot she'd claimed every Tuesday morning for 3 decades, kneeling in the front yard of her modest mortgage-free bungalow on Elm Street, caring for her award-winning peace roses. Martha stood as a community fixture, a retired trauma nurse who'd devoted 40 years to stitching up locals at County General. She represented the type of woman who delivered fresh pies to newcomers and crafted blankets for the homeless shelter. She stood small and fragile, with arthritis-twisted hands and snow-white hair. She hummed an old gospel melody, "Precious Lord, take my hand," while clipping dead blooms. The approaching patrol car escaped her notice. The vehicle, a black-and-white Dodge Charger bearing the Oak Haven Police Department emblem, rolled to a stop. Behind the wheel sat Officer Bradley Higgins. Higgins, 26 years old and fresh on the force, carried a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. He'd transferred from a bigger city department amid a cloud of excessive force allegations that the Union had quietly swept aside. To him, Oak Haven represented no community, it was territory waiting to be dominated. Higgins observed the elderly black woman tending her garden. He didn't register a retired nurse. He didn't see a grandmother. He spotted someone who seemed out of place in a neighborhood where home values kept climbing. He shifted into park, but left the engine idling. He stepped out, adjusting his duty belt. He skipped putting on his cap. He wanted visibility. "Hey!" Higgins bellowed, his hand hovering casually near his holster. "You there, step away from that residence." Martha's humming ceased. She blinked, using a dirt-stained glove to shield her eyes from the sun. Confused, she glanced around, assuming the officer addressed someone on the sidewalk. Finding nobody, she pointed at herself. "Me, officer?" she asked, her voice gentle and weathered. "Yes, you," Higgins barked, striding across the lawn, his heavy boots crushing the grass beneath. "I said, step away from the house. We've had reports of vagrants stealing copper and swiping packages around here. Show me some identification." Martha rose slowly, her knees popping audibly. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Officer, this is my home. I've lived here since 1985. My ID sits inside on the kitchen table." "Likely story," Higgins sneered. He'd closed the distance enough to smell the fertilizer and rosewater on her, but he dismissed it. "You expect me to believe you own property like this? A place this nice?" Martha stiffened. The dig was subtle, but she'd lived long enough in the South to grasp exactly what he implied. "My late husband and I purchased this house, young man. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll retrieve my identification so we can settle this." She turned toward the front porch. "I didn't give you permission to move," Higgins roared. Adrenaline and ego seized control. Higgins lunged forward, grabbing Martha by her upper arm. His grip crushed down, his fingers digging into her thin, elderly skin. "Ow! You're hurting me!" Martha cried out, her gardening shears dropping to the ground. "Stop resisting!" Higgins shouted, reciting the phrase he knew would look perfect in the report. He spun her around. Martha, frail and off balance, stumbled. Her foot snagged on a garden hose, and she crashed hard. She struck the ground face first, her cheek scraping against the brick flower bed edging. Her glasses flew off, cracking against the pavement. Agony exploded through her shoulder. She gasped, tasting blood in her mouth. "Look what you made me do," Higgins spat. He didn't offer assistance. Instead, he reached for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for trespassing, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer." "Assault?" Martha whimpered, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. I just fell. Please, I'm 72 years old. Get up, Higgins commanded, yanking her from the ground by her handcuffed wrists. The angle wrenched her shoulders into an unnatural position, and she released a sharp cry of pain. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, rushed onto her porch in her bathrobe. "Officer, what are you doing? That's Martha. She's a nurse. She lives there." "Back inside, ma'am, or you're next," Higgins threatened, aiming a taser at the neighbor. Mrs. Gable froze in terror. Higgins dragged Martha to the cruiser. He didn't protect her head when he shoved her into the back seat. Her shin banged against the door frame. "Please," Martha sobbed, huddled on the hard plastic seat, bleeding onto her floral apron. "My son, let me call my son." Higgins laughed as he slammed the door shut. He climbed into the driver's seat and caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Your son?" Higgins scoffed, gunning the engine. "What's he gonna do? Post your bail with drug money. You can call whoever you want when we get to the station, lady, if you're lucky." He peeled out of the driveway, leaving the trampled roses and shattered glasses behind. He had zero idea that the son he'd just mocked currently sat in a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility at Fort Bragg, briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff on a classified extraction operation. The holding cell at the Oak Haven Police Precinct reeked of stale urine and industrial bleach. It was freezing cold, a tactic designed to make detainees submissive. Martha sat on the metal bench, shivering. Her shoulder throbbed with a dull, sickening ache that her nursing background told her meant a rotator cuff tear. Her cheek had swollen, her lips split. She looked tiny, broken, and utterly misplaced. She'd been processed like a criminal, fingerprinted, mugshot taken. Her requests for medical attention had been ignored. "Quit whining," the booking sergeant, a man named Miller, had told her. He was older than Higgins, but equally complicit. He'd noticed the bruising on her face and asked zero questions. "In this department, blue protected blue. You'll see the nurse when we transfer you to county jail in the morning." Higgins sat at his desk nearby, hammering out his report. He typed quickly, creatively filling gaps. Asterisk. Suspect lunged. Feared for my safety. Aggressive behavior. Asterisk. "Hey, Brad," Miller called out, tossing a bag of pretzels to Higgins. "You catch a live one?" "Just another squatter thinking she owns the block," Higgins laughed, catching the pretzels. "Old lady's got a mouth on her, though. Kept yapping about her son." "Yeah?" Miller smirked. "Who is he? Some local mechanic?" "Didn't ask. Don't care." Inside the cell, Martha drew a deep, shuddering breath. She closed her eyes and prayed. Asterisk. "Lord, give me strength. And Lord, forgive Isaiah for what he's about to do." Asterisk. She stood on wobbly legs and walked to the bars. "Officer," she called out. Her voice emerged weak, but a steel undercurrent ran through it now. The shock was fading, replaced by the resolve of a woman who'd raised a warrior. "Quiet down back there," Higgins shouted without looking up. "I know my rights," Martha said louder. "I'm entitled to one phone call. You've processed me. You cannot deny me my call." Miller glanced at Higgins. "Technically, she's right, Brad. If the lawyer finds out we blocked the call, the DA might toss the case." Higgins rolled his eyes and stood up. He walked to the cell, unlocking the door with a dramatic sigh. "Fine," he spat. "You get 2 minutes. Make it quick. Call your bail bondsman. Call your pastor. I don't care. Just shut up afterward." He led her to the booking desk and pointed at a greasy corded phone on the wall. "Dial." Martha's shaking fingers lifted the receiver. She didn't dial a local number. She didn't dial an attorney. She dialed a number she'd memorized a decade ago, a number without a standard area code. It was a redirect line routing through a secure switchboard in Northern Virginia. She waited. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click. "Secure line Alpha 9. A crisp, robotic female voice answered. "Identify." "Martha Washington," she whispered. "Authorization code Zulu Tango 44. Mother." Higgins, leaning against the desk, scrolling through TikTok on his phone, didn't hear the code. He just heard an old lady mumbling. A pause filled the line. Then the connection tone shifted. The static cleared, replaced by a silence that felt heavy. "Mom?" The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and instantly alert. "Isaiah," Martha choked out, a sob finally breaking through her composure. 400 miles away, inside a windowless briefing room at Fort Bragg, Colonel Isaiah Zeke Washington froze. He raised a hand, silencing a room packed with generals and intelligence officers. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Mom," Isaiah said, his voice dropping an octave. "Why are you crying? Are you at the hospital?" "No, baby," Martha wept, clutching the phone cord. "I'm in a cage, in Oak Haven." "A cage?" Isaiah's grip on his secure phone tightened so hard the plastic creaked. "You mean jail? Why?" Police officer, Officer Higgins," Martha said, reading the name tag of the man standing 5 feet from her. "He came to the house. He said I was trespassing. He hurt me, Isaiah. He threw me down. My shoulder, I think it's broken, and my face." The silence on the other end was terrifying. It wasn't confusion. It was a predator sizing up a threat. "Is he there?" Isaiah asked. His voice was no longer that of a son. It was the voice of the ghost operator, the man who hunted warlords in the Hindu Kush. "Yes," Martha whispered. "He's laughing." "Mom," Isaiah said, "listen to me very carefully. Do not say another word to them. Do not sign anything. Put the phone down, sit on the floor, and wait. I am coming." "Isaiah, don't do anything crazy," she begged. "Just call a lawyer." "A lawyer isn't enough for this," Isaiah said softly. "I'll see you soon." The line went dead. Martha slowly hung up the phone. She looked at Higgins. "All done crying to your boy?" Higgins sneered, grabbing her arm to drag her back to the cell. "What's he gonna do? Drive down here in his beat-up Honda and yell at me?" Martha didn't resist this time. She walked with dignity, despite the pain. She looked Higgins dead in the eye, a look of profound pity on her face. "He isn't driving a Honda, officer," Martha said softly, "and he isn't going to yell." Higgins laughed and shoved her into the cell, locking the door. He returned to his desk, sipped his coffee, and high-fived Miller. They assumed the night was over. They believed they'd crushed another helpless citizen. They didn't notice that the phone on the sergeant's desk, the dedicated emergency line connected to the state database, had started blinking a frantic, silent red light. They didn't know that the airspace above Oak Haven was being cleared by the Federal Aviation Administration. And they certainly didn't know that 3 Black Hawk helicopters currently running a training exercise off the coast of Savannah had just received orders to change course. The clock on the wall ticked to 11:30 a.m. The war had just begun. Police Chief Roy Baker walked into the Oak Haven precinct at 11:15 a.m., holding a half-eaten donut. He was a man who preferred quiet days, speed traps, and the occasional ribbon-cutting ceremony. He liked his town sleepy. He walked past the front desk, nodding at Higgins and Sergeant Miller. "Everything quiet, boys?" Baker asked. "Just a routine bust, Chief," Higgins said, leaning back in his chair with his feet on the desk. "Took down a violent trespasser on Elm Street. She's cooling off in cell 2. "Good work," Baker grunted, heading into his office. He sat down and reached for his coffee. That's when the phone rang. Not the regular line, the Times Other Times line, the one supposedly reserved for natural disasters or direct calls from the governor's office. It had never rung in Baker's 10 years as chief. He stared at it for a second, a piece of glaze falling from his lip. He picked it up. "Chief Baker," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Chief Baker." The voice on the other end wasn't asking, it was stating. The voice was crisp, cold, and sounded like it was being routed through a dozen scramblers. "This is Director Sterling with the FBI, calling on behalf of the Joint Special Operations Command at the Pentagon. Are you the officer in command of the facility?" Baker choked on his coffee. The Pentagon?" "Yes, sir, I am, Chief. According to our satellite tracking and NSA intercepts, you are currently holding a high-value asset in your custody, a Mrs. Martha Washington." Baker frowned, confused. "Washington? I don't hold on." He covered the mouthpiece and shouted through his open door. "Higgins, What's the name of the old lady you brought in? Martha! Higgins yelled back, laughing. Martha Washington, like the First Lady. Baker felt a cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. He uncovered the phone. Yes, Director. We have a Martha Washington. She's, pending charges for resisting arrest. The silence on the other end was deafening. Chief Baker, the director said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. You are holding the mother of Colonel Isaiah Washington, the commander of Delta Force Team 6. Do you know what Team 6 does, Chief? No, sir, Baker stammered. They topple regimes. They hunt terrorists. And right now, Colonel Washington has just gone wheels up from Fort Bragg. He is declaring your precinct a hostile combat zone. A times what, asterisk? Baker stood up, knocking his chair over. You have approximately 20 minutes before he arrives, the director continued. My advice? Unlock that cell. Get that woman the best doctor you can find, and pray because I can't stop him. I'm just calling to warn you so you don't get your men killed. Click. Baker stood there, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like a hornet. He looked out the glass window of his office at Higgins, who was currently throwing paper airplanes at the wastebasket. Higgins! Baker screamed, his face turning purple. Get in here, now! Higgins jumped, startled by the sheer terror in the chief's voice. He sauntered in, annoyed. What's up, Chief? You spill your coffee? Who did you arrest? Baker grabbed Higgins by the collar of his uniform, slamming him against the wall. Who is she? Crazy old lady, Higgins stammered, his eyes wide. She attacked me. She... You lying son of a Baker shoved him away. That is a Delta Force commander's mother. The FBI just called me. The Pentagon called me. So what? Higgins scoffed, straightening his shirt, his arrogance still shielding him from reality. Military has no jurisdiction here. This is Oak Haven. I'm the law. Let him come. I'll arrest the son too, if he gives me lip. Baker looked at Higgins like he was staring at a dead man. You idiot. You didn't just kick a hornet's nest. You walked into a nuclear reactor. Suddenly, the lights in the station flickered. The computers at the front desk went black. The phones stopped ringing. What's happening? Sergeant Miller shouted from the main room. Power's out, but the emergency generator isn't kicking in. They cut it, Baker whispered, backing away from the window. They cut the grid. A low, thumping sound began vibrating the coffee in the mugs. It started as a hum, then grew into a rhythmic times thop, 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 thop times that shook the ceiling tiles. Dust rained down from the vents. Higgins walked to the front window and looked out into the parking lot. His jaw dropped. Chief, Higgins whispered, his voice finally cracking. Why is there a Black Hawk helicopter hovering over my car? The Oak Haven Police Department parking lot was usually filled with patrol cars and the occasional impounded pickup truck. Now, it was a landing zone. The wind from the rotors of the MH-60 Blackhawk whipped up a blinding cloud of dust and gravel. The sheer noise was paralyzing. Car alarms all over the block were blaring, triggered by the downdraft. Inside the station, Higgins reached for his sidearm, his hand shaking. I'm calling backup. This is an invasion. Don't you touch that gun! Chief Baker roared, diving over the desk to slap Higgins's hand away. Do not draw on them. Do you want to die? The helicopter touched down right in the center of the lot, crushing the hood of Higgins's prized Dodge Charger as if it were an aluminum can. The landing gear crumpled the engine block, metal screaming against metal. My car, Higgins shrieked. That's my car! The side doors of the Blackhawk slid open. This wasn't a standard military transport. There were no young privates carrying duffel bags. 4 men stepped out. They wore unmarked multicam fatigues, high-end tactical plate carriers, and carried customized HK-416 rifles slung across their chests. They moved with fluid, terrifying precision. They were operators. But the man in the lead didn't have a rifle. He wore a crisp dark green dress uniform with the rank of colonel on the shoulders. His chest was heavy with ribbons, silver star, bronze star with valor, purple heart. He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, carved out of granite. He took off his beret, tucked it under his arm, and walked toward the station's glass doors. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with a calm that was far scarier than any rage. "Lock the door!" Higgins yelled, backing up. "Miller! Lock the door!" Sergeant Miller fumbled for the keys, but it was too late. Colonel Isaiah Washington reached the double glass doors. He didn't pull the handle. He didn't knock. He simply raised his boot and kicked the locking mechanism. Asterisk, crash. Asterisk. The safety glass shattered into thousands of diamonds raining onto the linoleum floor. Isaiah stepped through the broken frame, his boots crunching on the glass. The 4 operators behind him fanned out, securing the room in seconds. They didn't point their weapons at the officers, but their fingers hovered near the triggers. The station went deathly silent. Isaiah stopped in the center of the room. He slowly scanned the area, his eyes landing on Chief Baker, then sliding over to Sergeant Miller, and finally locking on to Officer Higgins. Higgins felt his bladder spasm. He'd seen tough guys before, gangbangers and bikers, but he'd never seen eyes like this. They were dead eyes, shark eyes. "Who is the officer in charge?" Isaiah asked. His voice was low, smooth, and echoed off the walls. Chief Baker stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. I am. Chief Roy Baker. Colonel, please. We can discuss this." Isaiah ignored him. He turned his gaze solely to Higgins. He saw the name tag. He saw the smudge of dirt on Higgins's uniform, dirt from his mother's garden. "You," Isaiah said. He took a step toward Higgins. "Stay back!" Higgins yelped, his hand twitching toward his taser. "I am a sworn officer of the law. You are interfering with—" Isaiah moved. It was a blur. 1 second he was 5 feet away. The next he was inside Higgins's personal space. He grabbed Higgins' vest with one hand and lifted him off the ground. He slammed him backward into a filing cabinet. Asterisk. Bam. Asterisk. The cabinet dented. Higgins gasped for air, his feet dangling 6 inches off the floor. "You put your hands on her," Isaiah whispered, his face inches from Higgins's. "I saw the medical report from the ambulance I just intercepted on the radio. Dislocated shoulder, lacerations, hematoma." She resisted," Higgins wheezed, trying to pry Isaiah's steel fingers off his chest. "She fell. My mother," Isaiah said, tightening his grip until Higgins's face turned red, "has walked with a cane for 3 years. She doesn't resist anything except the urge to curse. If she has a bruise on her, I am going to break a bone in your body to match it. That is the exchange rate today." "Colonel," Chief Baker pleaded, "please, we will release her immediately." Charges dropped. Isaiah dropped Higgins. The young officer crumpled to the floor, coughing and gasping, clutching his throat. Isaiah turned to the chief. He adjusted his uniform jacket, smoothing out a wrinkle. The violence had vanished, replaced instantly by icy professionalism. "Where is she?" Isaiah asked. "Cell 2, Baker said quickly, pointing down the hall. "Miller, give him the keys. Now." Miller threw the keys. One of the Delta operators caught them in midair and handed them to Isaiah. Isaiah walked down the hallway, the heavy sound of his boots marking time. He reached Cell 2. Martha was sitting on the bench, holding her arm against her chest. She looked up as the shadow fell over her. She squinted through the one remaining lens of her broken glasses. "Isaiah?" she whispered. Isaiah unlocked the door and threw it open. The monster who had just kicked in a glass door and choked a cop vanished. In his place was a son. He knelt in front of her, ignoring the dirty floor. He gently touched her swollen cheek. "I'm here, Mama," he said softly. "I'm here." "I told you not to do anything crazy," Martha scolded him weakly, though she leaned her head against his hand. "Is that a helicopter I heard?" "Just a ride home," Isaiah smiled sadly. "Let's get you out of here." He scooped her up in his arms, careful of her shoulder. She weighed nothing. The rage flared in his gut again, hot and acidic, but he pushed it down. He carried her out of the cell, down the hall, and back into the main room. Higgins was standing up now, leaning against the desk, regaining some of his bravado now that the physical threat was over. He saw Isaiah carrying his mother. "You can't just take her," Higgins shouted, his stupidity overriding his survival instinct. There's paperwork! She's in the system! You can't just walk out with a prisoner! Isaiah stopped at the door. He turned slowly, Martha still in his arms. He looked at his team leader, a bearded giant named Dutch. Dutch, Isaiah said. Officer Higgins is concerned about the legality of the situation. I see that, boss, Dutch drawled. Call the JAG Corps, Isaiah said, staring at Higgins. And call the State Attorney General. Tell them I am invoking the Patriot Act, Section 8. Tell them I am declaring this officer an enemy combatant, pending an investigation into civil rights violations and domestic terrorism. Higgins's mouth fell open. Terrorism? Are you insane? You terrorized an American citizen, Isaiah said coldly. And you did it on my watch. He turned to the chief. Chief Baker, your station is now under military jurisdiction until the FBI arrives to seize your servers and body cam footage. Nobody leaves. Nobody makes a call. Isaiah carried his mother out into the blinding sun and the swirling dust. He walked toward the helicopter. Is it over? Martha asked, closing her eyes. No, Mama, Isaiah said, looking back at the shattered station where Higgins was now frantically trying to unlock his computer. For them, it's just getting started. The occupation of the Oak Haven police precinct lasted for 3 days. It was a siege, but not the kind with guns and barricades. It was a siege of paper, servers, and federal warrants. By the time the sun set on the first day, the Black Hawk had returned to base, but the pressure had only intensified. 2 black SUVs were parked horizontally across the precinct entrance, blocking all traffic. Men in suits with FBI windbreakers moved in and out, carrying boxes of files. Inside, Officer Higgins was no longer sitting at his desk with his feet up. He was sitting in Interrogation Room B, the same room where he'd terrorized teenagers for minor infractions. But this time the table was turned. Sitting across from him wasn't a local lawyer he could bully. It was Special Agent Sterling, a man with a sharp jawline and a sharper suit, who specialized in public corruption cases. I have rights, Higgins muttered, sweating through his uniform. I want my union rep. Your union rep took one look at the body cam footage we recovered and decided he had a family emergency in Florida, Sterling said dryly, sliding a tablet across the metal table. He's not coming, Bradley. Higgins looked at the tablet. It was playing the video from his dashcam, the video he thought he'd deleted. On the screen, Martha Washington was shown clearly standing on her own lawn. The audio was crisp. Asterisk. I didn't say you could move. Asterisk. Higgins's voice on the recording was filled with malice. The video showed him tripping her. It showed him laughing. Resisting arrest? Sterling asked, pausing the video. She was gardening, Bradley. You assaulted a 72-year-old woman because you didn't like her tone. It was a split-second decision, Higgins argued, though his voice was thin. I felt threatened. We found the other files too, Sterling interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. Since we seized the server, we ran an audit on your last 6 months of arrests. Funny thing about your drug busts, Bradley, in 4 separate cases, the baggies of methamphetamine you found all had the exact same batch number. A batch number that matches evidence from a raid you participated in 2 years ago in Atlanta. Higgins went pale. The air left his lungs. That's circumstantial, Higgins whispered. No, Sterling said, leaning forward. That's a federal crime. Conspiracy to distribute narcotics, falsifying evidence, kidnapping, violation of civil rights under color of law. You aren't looking at a suspension, son. You're looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Meanwhile, in the chief's office, the situation was even grimmer. Chief Baker was frantically shredding documents when the door opened. It wasn't the FBI. It was Colonel Isaiah Washington. He was back in civilian clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, but he looked even more imposing without the uniform. Colonel, Baker stammered, standing in front of the shredder. I was just cleaning up. Isaiah walked over to the shredder, unplugged it, and kicked it aside. You knew, Isaiah said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know he hurt her, Baker pleaded. I just signed the reports. I have 20 officers. I can't watch them all. You fostered the culture, Isaiah said, his voice calm but heavy with judgment. You let a man like Higgins wear a badge because he kept your arrest numbers up. You let him prey on the weak because you thought nobody would fight back. Isaiah pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. My mother is in the hospital, Chief. She needs surgery on her shoulder. Do you know what she asked me this morning? Baker shook his head, trembling. She asked me not to ruin your life, Isaiah said. She said you have grandkids. She said mercy is a virtue. Baker let out a breath of relief. She's a saint. She's a good woman. Thank you, Colonel. I promise I'll resign. I'll go quietly. Isaiah crumpled the paper and dropped it on the floor. She said mercy is a virtue, Isaiah repeated. But I'm not a saint, Chief. I'm a soldier, and I don't leave targets standing. The door behind Isaiah opened. 2 military police officers stepped in. Chief Roy Baker, one of them announced. You are under arrest for accessory to federal civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. Baker slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The glass house he'd built on corruption and silence had finally shattered. News of the arrest didn't just spread through Oakhaven. It exploded across the internet. Someone had filmed the Black Hawk landing. Someone else had leaked the dashcam footage. By the morning of the arraignment, the hashtag number Justice for Martha was trending #1 globally. The Oakhaven courthouse was usually a quiet place. Today, it looked like the Super Bowl. Satellite trucks from CNN, Fox News, and the BBC lined the streets. A crowd of over 5,000 people had gathered on the courthouse lawn. They held signs. Asterisk, protect our elders, asterisk, badges don't grant rights, asterisk, and Times karma for Higgins, asterisk. Martha Washington sat in the front row of the courtroom. Her arm was in a sling, and a bandage covered her cheek, but she sat upright, radiating quiet dignity. She wore her Sunday best, a navy blue dress, and a matching hat. Beside her sat Isaiah. He watched the door. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," the room went silent. But the silence broke when Officer Higgins was led in. He wasn't wearing his uniform. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed to his waist, and his feet were shackled. He shuffled in, head down, refusing to look at the gallery. He looked smaller without the badge. He looked like a frightened child. The judge, a stern woman named Helena Brooks, didn't waste time. "Mr. Higgins," Judge Brooks said, looking over her glasses, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a more flagrant abuse of power. You took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you hunted and hurt." "Your Honor," Higgins's lawyer began, trying to salvage the situation. "My client is young. He was under extreme stress. We ask for bail to be set at." "Bail is denied." Judge Brooks slammed her gavel. The crack echoed like a gunshot. "This man is a danger to the community and a flight risk. He will remain in custody until trial." As Higgins was led out, he looked up. His eyes met Martha's. He expected to see hate. He expected to see her gloating. Instead, Martha looked at him with profound sadness. She shook her head slowly, as if disappointed in a wayward child. That look hurt Higgins more than the handcuffs. It stripped him of his last defense, his belief that the world was a mean place and he was just playing the game. She showed him that he was the only monster in the room. The real punishment, however, came outside. As the deputies led Higgins toward the transport van, the crowd erupted. It wasn't violence Isaiah had asked for peace, but it was a wall of noise. 5,000 people chanting, "Shame, shame, shame." Higgins flinched with every shout. He tried to hide his face, but there was nowhere to go. The cameras were flashing, capturing his disgrace for history. Then the crowd parted. Isaiah Washington walked down the courthouse steps, guiding his mother. The chanting stopped. A hush fell over the thousands of people. They watched as the Delta Force operator opened the door of a sleek black sedan for his mother. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Martha. "Mrs. Washington, do you have anything to say to Officer Higgins?" Martha paused. She leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was raspy, but it carried across the silent square. "I pray for him," she said softly. "I pray he learns that strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about who you can help up." She got into the car. Isaiah looked at the camera one last time. He didn't smile. He just nodded a silent message to every other bully with a badge watching the news. Asterisk. "We are watching you." Asterisk. The car drove away, leaving Higgins alone in the back of the paddy wagon, surrounded by the ruins of his life. But the story wasn't quite over. The hard karma had one final twist left. The Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana, was a gray monolith of concrete and misery, a place where time didn't flow. It dripped, agonizingly slow and cold. For inmate 4592B, formerly known as Officer Bradley Higgins, the last 365 days had been an eternity. The arrogance that had once fueled his stride, the swagger of a man who believed a badge made him a god, had been surgically removed by the brutal reality of federal prison. Higgins was no longer the hunter. He was the bottom of the food chain. He worked in the sanitation unit. It was cruel irony assigned by the warden, a man who'd followed the news coverage of the Oak Haven incident with disgust. Higgins, the man who'd mocked an elderly woman for smelling like fertilizer and dirt, now spent 10 hours a day scrubbing the latrines of murderers, fraudsters, and gang leaders. It was a Tuesday afternoon, humid and oppressive. The air in the common room smelled of stale sweat and boiled cabbage. Higgins sat in the back corner, nursing a plastic cup of lukewarm water. He'd lost 40 pounds. His hair, once gelled and styled, was shaved to the scalp to prevent lice. His eyes darted nervously around the room, always checking the perimeter, a habit born not of police training but of pure, unadulterated fear. He'd learned the hard way that in here, ex-cops were currency, and the exchange rate was pain. "Hey, 4592, a guard barked, rapping his baton against the metal doorframe. Eyes front, special broadcast. Usually, the television was tuned to sports or mindless daytime talk shows, but today, the screen flickered to the National News Network. Higgins looked up, disinterested. He tried not to think about the outside world. Thinking about it only made the nights harder. But then he saw the chyron at the bottom of the screen. Asterisk 1 year later. The Miracle of Oak Haven. Asterisk. Higgins's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt a wave of nausea. He wanted to look away, to run back to his cell and hide under the thin wool blanket. But he couldn't move. He was frozen. The camera swept over his hometown, but it wasn't the town he remembered. The streets were clean, the potholes were filled. The menacing atmosphere of the precinct he'd once ruled was gone, replaced by shots of officers walking the beat, actually shaking hands with residents. Then the camera focused on Elm Street. Higgins gasped. The empty, trash-strewn lot that had sat opposite Martha Washington's bungalow for a decade, the lot Higgins used to park in to write speed tickets, was gone. In its place stood a magnificent structure. It was modern, built of warm red brick and floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the Georgia sun. It looked like a university library or a high-end tech campus. Above the double doors, etched in silver steel, were the words, asterisk, asterisk, the Martha Washington Community Justice Center, asterisk, asterisk. Look at that, an inmate sitting near Higgins whistled. That's some fancy real estate. The camera cut to a live feed of the opening ceremony. A crowd of thousands had gathered. There were news crews from Germany, Japan, and Brazil. And there she was. Martha Washington stood at the podium. She looked different. The bruises were long gone. The arm that Higgins had dislocated was out of the sling, though she rested it gently on the lectern. She wore a suit of pure white, looking not like a victim but like royalty. Behind her, standing like a sentinel carved from granite, was Colonel Isaiah Washington. He was in his dress blues, his chest heavy with medals, his face unreadable behind dark aviator sunglasses. He didn't look at the camera. He scanned the crowd, ever the protector. Martha leaned into the microphone. Her voice, once raspy and terrified in the back of Higgins's cruiser, was now amplified, booming across the square and through the television speakers in the prison cafeteria. "They tried to bury us," Martha said, her voice steady. "They didn't know we were seeds." The crowd erupted in applause. Higgins flinched at the noise. 1 year ago, Martha continued, the silence returning instantly. Darkness visited this street. A man with a badge forgot his oath. He forgot that authority without compassion is just tyranny. He tried to break my body, but he only succeeded in waking up my son. The camera zoomed in on Isaiah. He gave a rare, small smile, not of humor, but of grim satisfaction. "But this building," Martha gestured to the glass structure behind her, "is not about him. We do not build monuments to darkness. We build lighthouses for the storm. We use the settlement money, every single penny the city paid for my pain, to build this. A place where people can get free legal counsel. A place where the hungry can eat. A place where the broken are put back together." Higgins felt a tear leak out of his eye. Asterisk. The settlement. Millions of dollars. She gave it all away. Asterisk. He couldn't comprehend it. In his world, you took what you could. You grabbed power. You grabbed money. "And I couldn't have done it alone," Martha said. "I had help. I needed a manager for the intake center. Someone who understands what it's like to lose everything. Someone who knows what it feels like when the world judges you for the sins of your family." Higgins frowned. Asterisk. "Who?" Asterisk. "Please welcome my director of operations," Martha announced, stepping aside. A woman walked up to the podium. Higgins stopped breathing. The plastic cup slipped from his hand and clattered onto the concrete floor, spilling water over his cheap canvas shoes. The woman was frail. Her hair was gray and pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple, professional navy blazer. She looked tired, her face mapped with lines of grief and stress. But she was standing tall. It was Linda Higgins, his mother. "Mom," Higgins whispered, the words strangling him. The inmates around him turned. "That's your old lady?" one sneered. "She looks nice. Too nice for a scumbag like you." On the screen, Linda gripped the sides of the podium until her knuckles turned white. She looked into the camera, her eyes wet. "My name is Linda," she began, her voice trembling. "I am the mother of the man who did this." A hush fell over the crowd in Oak Haven. "When my son was arrested," Linda continued, tears spilling over, "I lost my job. I lost my home. The bank took the house because I'd leveraged it to pay for his legal defense, a defense that failed. I was sleeping in my car in the Walmart parking lot. I was eating out of dumpsters. I was spat on in the grocery store because I raised a monster." Higgins buried his face in his hands. He hadn't known. He'd been so consumed with his own misery in prison that he hadn't even thought about where she was. He assumed she was with her sister in Alabama. He didn't know she was homeless. He didn't know she was starving. "I had decided to end it," Linda confessed to the world. "I was sitting on the edge of the bridge on Route 9. I had nothing left." Higgins began to sob, a raw, ugly sound that echoed in the silent cafeteria. And then Linda wiped her face, looking at Martha with a reverence usually reserved for saints. "A car pulled up. It was Colonel Washington. He didn't yell. He didn't blame me. He just opened the door and said, 'Ma'am, my mother would like to have tea with you.'" Higgins rocked back and forth, clutching his stomach. Asterisk tea? They had tea while he was rotting in a cage? Asterisk. "Mrs. Washington took me in," Linda said, her voice gaining strength. "She fed me. She gave me a room in her own home. And when I asked her why she would help the mother of the man who beat her, she told me something I will never forget." Linda looked directly into the camera lens, and it felt like she was looking right through the prison bars, straight into Bradley Higgins's soul. She said, "A mother is not responsible for the darkness in her son's heart, but she can be the light that helps others find their way. She gave me a job. She gave me my dignity back. She gave me a life." Linda turned to Martha and hugged her. The two women, one black, one white, one the victim, one the mother of the abuser, embraced in front of the world. It was an image of forgiveness so powerful it felt like a physical blow. Isaiah stepped forward and wrapped his massive arms around both of them. The feed cut back to the studio anchors, who were wiping away tears. Higgins sat on the floor, broken. This was the hard karma. It wasn't the beatings he took in the yard. It wasn't the bad food or the cold cell. It was this. It was the realization that he was completely irrelevant. He wasn't the villain of the story anymore. He was a footnote. He was a mistake that had been corrected. His victim had become his family's savior. Martha Washington had effectively replaced him. She was providing for his mother, protecting his mother, loving his mother in a way he never had. He'd been the son who took. Martha was the stranger who gave. "Yo, Higgins," a guard said, his voice unusually soft, lacking its usual bite. "Show's over. Get back to work." Higgins stood up slowly. His legs felt like lead. He looked at the blank screen one last time. He realized then that he would serve every single day of his 15-year sentence, and when he got out, he would have nowhere to go. His mother belonged to them now. She was part of the Washington family. He had beaten an old woman in a garden, and in return, she had stolen his entire world simply by being better than him. He picked up the mop. He dipped it into the gray, murky water of the bucket. "Yes, sir," Higgins whispered. He started to scrub. He scrubbed the floor until his fingers bled, trying to wash away the stain of who he was, knowing for the first time that some stains go so deep, not even a lifetime of scrubbing can get them out. Outside the prison walls, the sun was setting. But in Oak Haven, the lights of the community center flickered on, shining bright and steady in the darkness, a beacon of justice that would outlast them all. What a roller coaster of emotions! From the rage of witnessing an innocent grandmother abused to the absolute satisfaction of watching the ghost operator descend from the sky, this story proves one undeniable fact. You never, ever know who you're messing with. Higgins thought he was the apex predator because he had a badge and a gun. He forgot that there are wolves in this world who don't bark, they just bite. The ending really seals it for me. The fact that Martha used her settlement not for a yacht or a mansion, but to help the community and even saved Higgins' own mother, that is the ultimate victory. That is a level of class and strength that Higgins will never understand. So, what do you think? Did Higgins get what he deserved, or was 15 years too light for what he did? And would you have been able to forgive his mother like Martha did? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of hard karma and military justice, please smash that like button, it really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a CEO who fires his janitor only to realize the janitor owns the building. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.